Thank you very much, and also for the encouraging note at the end there. I'd like now to move directly over to our second keynote speaker, Mari Lou Dupont from OECD.
Good morning, everyone. I apologize, I'm a bit sick. I hope my voice will not break. On behalf of the OECD, many thanks for the opportunity to participate in this wonderful conference and talk to you about responsible business conduct. In the recent years, responsible business conduct has emerged as a key priority in the global economic agenda. As a result of revisions of leading international instruments at the United Nations, the OECD, IFC, and ISO, we now have a better common understanding on what responsible business conduct entails. This new convergence and coherence on responsible business conduct international standards represent a significant shift in understanding how business mitigates risks and how government support and promote responsible business conduct. Enterprises are now expected to take positive actions to ensure that they avoid adverse impacts and address those impacts when they nevertheless occur, or to use layman language, to do no harm while contributing to sustainable development goals and inclusive growth. The new global responsible business conduct agenda aims to guide enterprises on how to meet their responsibilities and to enable stakeholders to hold enterprises accountable to realistic responsible business conduct standards and expectations. The end result is a more predictable business environment. The 2011 update of the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, which are the most comprehensive government-backed instrument, recommendations on responsible business conduct in existence today, are in a unique position to support this global agenda. The guidelines capture the expectations of now 46 countries. Jordan joined a week and a half ago, on what responsibility means in areas such as the environment, human rights, labor relations, fighting corruption, or consumer interest. The 2011 update is the result of a multi-stakeholder process that included businesses, trade unions, and NGOs. Enterprises welcomed at the time the update because it provided more clarity on how they were expected to behave. More precisely, the guidelines integrate this idea that enterprises have an independent responsibility to respect fundamental rights, and the way enterprises can meet this responsibility is through due diligence. The guidelines align with the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights on that matter. Due diligence is understood as the process through which enterprises can identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for how they address the actual and potential adverse impacts as part of decision-making and risk management systems. In that context, the Environment chapter provides a framework for multinational enterprises to raise their environmental performance and help maximize their contribution to environmental protection through improved internal management and better planning. In fact, even prior to the update, the Environment chapter contained different steps for due diligence. The chapter was then used as an inspiration for the UN Guiding Principles. Now, let me give you a bit more details about the Environment chapter and as it relates to due diligence. The guidelines recommend that enterprises adopt a system of environmental management to help identify their impacts. This means collecting and evaluating the relevant information about impacts. This also means having objectives and targets to improve performance and monitor the progress made to meet those objectives and targets. Enterprises should assess and address their potential impacts over the full life cycle with a view to avoid and mitigate them. Environmental impact assessment should be prepared where the impacts are expected to be important, so most of the time, and where the activities are subject to a decision from a competent authority. Contingency plans should be maintained to prevent, mitigate, and control serious environmental damages. This is really at the heart of a sound environmental management system. Enterprises should actively engage with communities to inform them of potential impacts and take their views into account in their decisions. The guidelines encourage enterprises to improve their performance in all parts of their operations, including in their supply chains, even if this is not formally required in the countries in which they operate. As you would expect, those recommendations rely on the work undertaken by the Environment Directorate at the OECD, which recommend different policy actions for green growth and sustainable development. Those proposed policy actions work as strong incentives for multinationals to raise their environmental performance. For example, make pollution more costly than green alternatives through environmental taxes. Value and price the natural assets and ecosystem services. Remove environmentally harmful subsidies. Adopt effective regulations and standards. Encourage green innovation and facilitate better consumer choices. Governments have to provide a clear message and direction to the private sector about their expectations on responsible business practices by creating an enabling environment for the implementation of responsible business practices. Governments have a central role to play in helping enterprises bridge the gap between theory and practice. This is the spirit behind our efforts at the OECD, making sure that the guidelines are more than just recommendations on paper, or at least try to do. The effectiveness of the guidelines is derived in that adhering countries place concrete obligations in themselves. Each adhering country is obliged to set up a national contact point, which are tasked with promoting the guidelines and providing mediation services to resolve any issues arising from the non-observance of the guidelines. This effectively makes the guidelines the only international corporate responsibility instrument with a built-in grievance mechanism, allowing access to remedy in a constructive way, as opposed as heavy legal procedures. The fact that more than 300 specific instances were considered since 2000 proves that guidelines can be more than just recommendations on paper. Furthermore, the multi-stakeholder proactive agenda included in the 2011 update help respond to new challenges, in particular as to how to conduct due diligence. The newly created Working Party on Responsible Business Conduct is working with all stakeholders, government, enterprises, and civil society, to help enterprises, as well as their suppliers, better respond to risk associated with products, regions, sectors, and industries. In that context, 3 proactive agenda projects were launched. One on due diligence in the financial sector, the second one on responsible agriculture, and the third one on stakeholder engagement in the extractive sector. Discussions today are an important step in ensuring that environmental responsibility is placed at the center of business strategies. I wish all of us the best of luck, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to both keynote speakers. As I said yesterday, which I'll repeat today to keynote speaker who was not here then, the tradition here in Norway is to give, for example, a bouquet of flowers to the speaker. And in the spirit of the project, we have decided not to give flowers that are dying to the speaker, but rather instead pay for the planting of trees as a climate change mitigation effort, and we will, in a sustainable way, then send out an email afterwards to confirm this present. So I hope that will be as appreciated.